sometimes underperforming, sometimes overperforming, based on what the betting line said, so that co-conspirators could profit off prop wagers nobody else knew were coming. This is the 6th NBA figure swept into federal gambling cases since the investigation began in October 2025, joining Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, Ed Davis, and a current NBA player agent. What began in October as one scandal involving the coach has now widened into something touching nearly every level of the sport. Players, coaches, and the agents who represent them. And the basketball world is processing this in real time, watching a second active investigation arrive less than a year after the first was supposed to be the wake-up call. This is not a rumor, it is not a leak report. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York, Malik Beasley has been arrested and charged along with former NBA player Ed Davis and 4 co-conspirators with wire fraud conspiracy, bribery in sporting contests, honest services wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. These are federal charges, the kind that carry potential prison sentences measured in decades. And they arrived just days after Beasley had completed his most prolific NBA season yet, emerging as a legitimate star on the Detroit Pistons team that made the playoffs for the first time in nearly 20 years. Today we are going to break down exactly who Malik Beasley is, what prosecutors have alleged, how the scheme allegedly worked, what it means for the NBA's relationship with gambling, and why the reactions from inside the league tell you everything about the pressure this sport is now under. Let's get into it. Malik Mikal Beasley was born on November 26, 1996 in Atlanta, Georgia. His family was steeped in basketball. His father, Michael Beasley, played professionally in Chile, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. Sports were not just a pastime in the Beasley household, they were a vocation. Malik grew up in Alpharetta, Georgia, attending St. Francis School, where he quickly became the most dangerous scorer in the building. By his senior year, he was averaging 22.2 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 1.9 steals per game, earning Georgia's Class 1A Player of the Year award and a spot on the All-State Class A first team. He was a 4-star recruit, fielding offers from UCLA, UConn, Wake Forest, and Oregon before committing to Florida State. At Florida State, Beasley did not take long to announce himself. In his freshman season during 2015-16, he averaged 15.6 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 1.5 assists across 34 games, leading the team in scoring, helping the Seminoles to a 2-0-1-4 record, and earning ACC All-Freshman Team honors. His scoring average was the second highest for a freshman in the program's history. He ranked 8th in the entire ACC in free throw percentage at 81.3% and 10th in field goal percentage at 47.1%. By March of 2016, he made a decision that no Florida State player had ever made before. He declared for the NBA draft after just one season, becoming the first one-and-done prospect in the program's basketball history. The decision came with a complication. A stress fracture in his right leg required surgery and kept him from participating in pre-draft workouts, introducing medical uncertainty into his pre-draft profile. Teams took notice, but the Denver Nuggets took a chance, selecting him with the 19th overall pick in the 2016 NBA draft. Beasley's early years in Denver were quiet by necessity. The Nuggets were deep in the backcourt, and a young player coming off surgery did not immediately earn minutes. But as the seasons progressed, his role expanded. By his 3rd year in Denver, he was averaging over 11 points per game across 81 games, establishing himself as a reliable scoring option off the bench. In February of 2020, the Nuggets traded him to the Minnesota Timberwolves as part of a package deal. That trade changed his trajectory entirely. Minnesota gave him room to operate, and Beasley responded. He signed a 4-year, $60 million extension with the Timberwolves in November of 2020, one of the most significant contracts of his career to that point. He became one of the most dangerous three-point shooters in the league, at one point setting a Timberwolves franchise record for most three-pointers made in a single season with 240, surpassing a mark previously held by Kevin Love. He made 11 three-pointers in a single game against Oklahoma City in March of 2022, scoring 33 points, the most in an NBA game made exclusively from beyond the arc. His 2021-22 season with Minnesota was strong before suspension and hamstring injury limited him to just 37 games. When healthy, he was launching 8.7 three-point attempts per game, establishing himself as one of the most prolific volume shooters at his position. From Minnesota, he was traded to the Utah Jazz in July of 2022 as part of the blockbuster Rudy Gobert deal. The Jazz then sent him to the Los Angeles Lakers in a 3-team trade in February of 2023. The Lakers declined his team option that summer, making him a free agent. He landed with the Milwaukee Bucks in July of 2023. And then, in the summer of 2024, he signed with the Detroit Pistons, where he would have arguably the best season of his NBA career, averaging 16.3 points per game while shooting 41.6% from three on 9.3 attempts per game. He finished with 319 three-pointers made in the 2024-25 season, becoming one of only 5 players in NBA history to surpass 300 three-pointers in a single season. He was a finalist for 6th Man of the Year. The Pistons made playoffs. Beasley played meaningful minutes in the postseason against the New York Knicks. He was by every visible measure playing the best basketball of his life, and then the federal probe that had been quietly building behind the scenes finally broke into public view. According to the indictment unsealed in Brooklyn on June 29, 2026, prosecutors alleged that the scheme began around December 2023 and ran through April 2024 during Beasley's season with the Milwaukee Bucks. The federal probe itself had reportedly started a full year earlier in June 2025 when authorities began examining unusual betting activity tied to Beasley's individual performance lines from that Bucks season. At least one major sportsbook had flagged suspiciously concentrated action on his prop bets, particularly around specific Bucks games in early 2024. The investigation was conducted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the New York City Police Department's Joint Organized Crime Task Force, the same task force that had already indicted Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, Portland Trail Blazers head coach and Hall of Famer Chauncey Billups, and former player and assistant coach Damon Jones in October of 2025. 6 defendants were named in the case: Beasley, former NBA player Ed Davis, and 4 co-conspirators identified as William Brown, Robert Gorodetsky, Ernesto Plasencia, and Paolo Zamorano, the last of whom is described in court documents as a current NBA player agent. The charges collectively include wire fraud conspiracy, bribery in sporting contests, honest services wire fraud conspiracy, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Prosecutors allege that Davis acted as Beasley's gatekeeper in the scheme, coordinating the betting arrangements and communicating with Beasley about how he should perform on specific nights. The indictment states directly that Beasley, quote, agreed with Davis to manipulate his performance in NBA games so Davis and other co-conspirators could place fraudulent wagers on his performance. In return, according to prosecutors, Beasley received bribes typically structured as debt relief. The indictment notes that despite earning tens of millions of dollars during his NBA career, Beasley had accumulated multi-million-dollar gambling losses, and Davis extended him several loans. The alleged bribes came in the form of having those debts reduced or eliminated. The text messages cited in the indictment are among the most damaging details in the public record. About a month before January 26, 2024 game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, Davis allegedly texted Beasley, "Only way you can beat Vegas is sports betting. Everything else they got the edge. We can make some good money." Communications were often conducted over Snapchat, with Davis telling Beasley it was better to talk on there. Prosecutors alleged that a day before the Cavaliers game, Beasley sent texts indicating he would underperform in rebounds. Co-conspirators then placed thousands of dollars in wagers on his under-rebounds prop bet. Beasley finished that game with 3 rebounds, 1 fewer than his 3.5 betting line and well below his 3.7 seasonal average. The indictment also references alleged coordination before a February 27th game against the Charlotte Hornets and a March 10th game against the Los Angeles Clippers, with Beasley allegedly sharing his intended performance levels and points and rebounds before each of those contests as well. The scheme failed at least once. On March 21st, 2024, in a game against the Brooklyn Nets, Beasley allegedly agreed to underperform in rebounds, but he grabbed 6 that night, far above his average, and the intended bets did not pay off. U.S. Attorney Joseph Nosella Jr. put the stakes plainly in his statement. Bribery and insider betting schemes like this, one involving former NBA players and a current NBA player agent who exploited inside NBA information for profit, erode the integrity of American sports and victimize the sports watching public. Ed Davis played in the NBA from 2010 to 2020, earning a reported $46.5 million across his career, with teams including Toronto, Memphis, Portland, New Orleans, Brooklyn, Utah, Sacramento, Cleveland, and others. He and Beasley were former Minnesota Timberwolves teammates. According to the indictment, Davis was not simply a passive participant. He is alleged to have served as the operational coordinator of the scheme, identifying which games to target, communicating performance instructions to Beasley, and then distributing the information to co-conspirators who placed the bets. Davis was also arrested and arraigned in Brooklyn. Prosecutors also noted that Davis is a co-conspirator in the previously charged cases involving Damon Jones, who in April 2026 had already pleaded guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud for his role in defrauding major sports books including DraftKings and FanDuel by using insider NBA information to gain betting edges. To understand why these allegations are so serious, it is essential to understand what player prop betting actually is and how deeply it has embedded itself into the modern sports ecosystem. A player prop bet is a wager placed not on the outcome of a game, but on the individual player's statistical performance in that game. Will Malik Beasley score over or under 15.5 points tonight? Will he grab more or fewer than 3.5 rebounds? Will he make at least 2 3-pointers? These markets exist by the thousands across every NBA game offered by major legal platforms including DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, and dozens of others. According to industry analysis, player-specific prop bets now represent somewhere between 10 and 30% of total sportsbook activity, and they carry higher profit margins for books than traditional game bets because they attract casual fans who may not understand them as well as they understand standard point spreads. Players have absolute control over their own individual outputs in ways that no outside party could easily predict or replicate. A player who decides to be passive on the glass for one half of a basketball game, who avoids positioning himself for rebounds in situations where he normally would, can do so without anyone on the broadcast calling it out. The box score will simply show fewer rebounds. The betting slip will simply cash, which is precisely what made prop markets both enormously popular and uniquely vulnerable to manipulation. As one expert framing the issue put it, prop bets give the player absolute control over the outcome for a bettor in ways that altering the final score never could. The player is the market, and if the player is compromised, the market is compromised invisibly, quietly, inside statistics that millions of fans never think twice about. Integrity monitoring firms like Sportradar and the company formerly known as US Integrity, now rebranded as IC360, operate inside this ecosystem as surveillance layers. These firms use sophisticated real-time analytics to track betting patterns across licensed operators looking for sudden spikes in wager volume on specific player lines, unusual clustering of bets from connected accounts, or overlapping IP addresses, and significant line movements that arrive without any publicly available explanation. When the monitoring systems detect these anomalies, they are legally required to send alerts to state gaming regulators, to the sports books themselves, and to the relevant sports leagues. It was exactly this kind of flagging that first drew attention to the betting activity around Beasley's performances during the 2023-24 season. Sportsbooks noticed concentrated action on his underprop lines in specific games, action that did not match the volume or distribution of normal market behavior. The allegation that a player deliberately altered his statistics to benefit bettors sits at the most serious end of the sports integrity spectrum. Changing who wins or loses a game requires corrupting multiple participants and is enormously difficult to hide. Manipulating one player's individual stat line is, comparatively, a much smaller and more manageable operation. A player who decides to take fewer shots, avoid going for offensive rebounds, or limit his effort in specific categories in specific games can do so in ways that are nearly invisible to a casual viewer. Nobody watching the January 26 Bucks-Cavaliers game would have thought twice about Beasley finishing with 3 rebounds. It looked like an ordinary night. According to prosecutors, it was anything but. The NBA's response arrived quickly. Spokesman Mike Bass issued a statement confirming that the league was reviewing the case. The NBA has long maintained one of the most stringent anti-gambling policies in professional sports, with explicit prohibitions on players, coaches, team employees, and officials wagering on any NBA game, whether involving their own team or any other. Players are briefed on these rules every season during training camp. The penalties for violation are severe, with bans ranging from 1 year to lifetime, depending on the nature of the offense. Commissioner Adam Silver had previously acknowledged in public comments during the earlier Rozier and Billups arrests that federal investigators possess resources the league itself does not: subpoena power, the ability to compel testimony, and the authority to threaten criminal consequences that no internal league investigation could match. Silver also pointed out in an interview with Prime Video's Cassidy Hubbard that when the league had reviewed Rozier's betting activity prior to his arrest, investigators had not found a violation, a result he attributed directly to the limits of what the NBA office could access without law enforcement cooperation. That admission was significant coming from the league's highest office. It was a public acknowledgement that the NBA's own integrity infrastructure had real and meaningful gaps. The NBA's own investigation of Rozier prior to his arrest had cleared him, a result Silver publicly attributed to the limits of what the league office could access without law enforcement cooperation. The player and league reactions to the broader gambling scandal that had been building since October of 2025 were deeply revealing. When Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier were first arrested, ESPN collected comments from dozens of current players and coaches. Several players voiced support for the individuals they knew personally. One coach said of Billups, a man he had known since the 7th grade, that he cared about him immensely and believed everyone deserved due process before judgments were made. But other voices, including players, focused on something broader and more uncomfortable. One player was direct in describing the collision between the gambling industry and the athletes whose performances were being wagered on. That whole world was introduced a couple years ago, and I don't think they took players into consideration. We don't benefit from any of the profits, but we got to deal with a lot of the extra negativity and scrutiny behind all the gambling stuff. On top of that, it creates more integrity issues. That sentiment that players were caught in the middle of a financial ecosystem they helped create without having any say in its construction have been building across the league for years. Multiple players noted that the explosion of betting had transformed how fans interacted with them, with some reporting that strangers approached them about their prop lines. That social media commentary now frequently discussed whether a player was going to hit or miss a statistical threshold rather than whether he played well. The sport had been repackaged as a betting vehicle, and the players inside it had become the commodities on which billions of dollars were wagered every single night. The financial fallout for Beasley himself represents one of the most dramatic reversals in recent NBA history. The Detroit Pistons have reportedly been exploring a 3-year contract extension worth approximately $42 million before the gambling investigation became public in June 2025. That conversation ended. Beasley instead signed a 1-year deal for $6 million for the 2024-25 season, far below what a player with his production might otherwise have commanded. After the season, he became a free agent again. He had not been signed by any NBA team as the new indictment was unsealed. The career trajectory was stark. A player who had earned $60 million in NBA salaries, who had just finished the season in which he made 319 three-pointers and was considered a Sixth Man of the Year finalist, found himself playing in a Caribbean basketball league while a federal investigation quietly gathered its evidence around him. His most recent playing activity was with the Cangrejeros de Santurce in Puerto Rico's Baloncesto Superior Nacional League, the same league his father once played in, suggesting an NBA return had not materialized before the federal charges arrived. According to career earnings data, Beasley earned approximately $60 million in NBA salaries between 2016 and 2025. Making the indictment's assertion that he accumulated multi-million-dollar gambling losses one of the more striking financial portraits in recent sports history. Beasley's attorney, Steve Haney, has been representing him throughout the investigation's public phase. In the summer of 2025, when the probe first became public, Haney pushed back aggressively, noting that an investigation is not a charge and that Beasley was entitled to the presumption of innocence. By August of 2025, Haney told ESPN that Beasley was no longer considered a target of the Eastern District investigation, a statement that appeared to suggest the federal interest had moved on. That turned out not to be the case. Following the arrest on June 29, 2026, Haney coordinated Beasley's voluntary surrender to the government, where Beasley set to appear in Brooklyn for arraignment. The voluntary nature of the surrender is significant. It typically reflects cooperation by defense counsel, but prosecutors and can be a factor in how judges assess a defendant's posture toward legal proceedings. The charges Beasley faces remain allegations. He has not been convicted of anything. The legal process is ongoing, and his defense team will have the opportunity to challenge the government's evidence at every stage. The Beasley arrest cannot be understood in isolation. It is the latest chapter in a gambling scandal that has been building inside professional basketball since the Supreme Court's 2018 decision in Murphy v. NCAA opened the door for states outside Nevada to legalize sports wagering. Before that ruling, legal sports betting in the United States was essentially confined to Nevada. After it, the industry exploded. By 2025, 39 states and the District of Columbia had legalized regulated sports wagering. The The NBA, along with the NFL, MLB, and NHL, had lobbied aggressively for state legislation and had struck data sharing agreements with major sportsbooks and integrity monitoring firms worth billions of dollars. The league's official data partners, Sportradar and Genius Sports, receive handsome fees for distributing real-time game statistics that enable sportsbooks to offer thousands of prop bets per game, including live in-game wagers down to the outcome of the next play. NBA arenas were converted into environments where betting was actively promoted, with odds displayed on screens and betting kiosks integrated into the fan experience. The league's own media properties leaned into gambling content. What nobody fully reckoned with was how completely this transformation changed the incentive landscape for the people actually playing. The Jontay Porter case offered an early warning. Porter, a Toronto Raptors center, was permanently banned from the NBA in April of 2024 after investigators determined he had leaked his own injury status to people who placed bets on the statistical unders and had himself wagered on games. An $80,000 parlay placed on his underperformance had nearly paid out $1.1 million before sportsbooks caught the irregularity and flagged it. The Porter case was supposed to be a cautionary tale. Then came Rozier, then Billups, then Damon Jones, and now Beasley. Historical precedent for corruption in professional basketball exists but was supposed to be ancient history. The Tim Donaghy scandal, in which a sitting NBA referee was found to have bet on games he officiated and shared information with professional gamblers, shook the league in 2007 and led to years of enhanced referee oversight, expanded integrity protocols, and a sustained effort by Commissioner David Stern to contain the reputational damage. The Donaghy case involved a referee, not a player. What is happening now involves players themselves and a current team's head coach, and a former player turned assistant and an active player agent. The scope is wider, the participants are closer to the action, and the mechanisms of modern betting make player props significantly easier to manipulate than game outcomes ever were. The Donaghy scandal cost the NBA dearly in public trust for years and prompted David Stern to implement sweeping changes to referee oversight, assignment procedures, and gambling-related monitoring. Adam Silver now faces a version of that same reckoning, but with the added complexity that the league itself has financially entangled its business with the very gambling industry that made these schemes both more profitable and more tempting. What makes the Beasley situation particularly resonant inside the league is not just the legal jeopardy he faces, it is what it implies about the environment the NBA helped create. A generation of players grew up watching gambling content on every channel, saw their own stats become the basis for billions of dollars in wages, understood that people were getting rich off the margin between what a player was expected to do and what he actually did. And some of those players found that gap very difficult to ignore. The indictment says Beasley had racked up multi-million-dollar gambling losses despite earning $60 million in professional basketball salaries. It says he needed those debts reduced. It says a former teammate found him in that position and made him a proposition that federal prosecutors now describe as a criminal conspiracy. Regardless of how the legal